when we had the registration, we had a couple of the guests send in their questions, what they wanted to ask you. So we have a couple of questions here from the Adulting with Joyce Pring listeners. Ready ka na ba? Miss Universe na ata.
Yes, I am ready.
Kaya naman lalim na sasabihin lang pala.
Sige, I know you're used to this, so I'm sure everyone will learn from anything you have to say. So, started off with our first question from Anna Veronica Macaltao. Am I saying that right? Anna Veronica. Okay, Anna wants to know, how do you handle being a mom, a wife, and a public figure in the pandemic?
Barely. I barely handle it and I barely have a good grasp at it. But I think, it's weird because are there any moms or parents here? Raise your hands. Yes, the moms are here. The mamas are here. Ayan. And see, Miss Ashanti Rona. Soon to be mom of two. Yes. I think it's just one of those things that you eventually learn to adapt into and grow into. It's not something that you really think about. But I feel like before I became a mom, I thought about it as if, I have to prepare all of these things. I have to go through all of these things before I become a mom. And then once I became a mom, it was just a lot of winging it. Like, I just have to wing everything and figure things out along the way. And I think that's kind of how everything is, especially even as an adult, diba? Hindi ka naman, you don't go into college knowing what college life is going to be like. Or you don't go into your first job knowing what your first job is going to be like. It's a lot of figuring things out along the way. And that's where the true adulting really happens, in those adjustments and character development. So,
Because adulting is really just winging it.
yeah, just winging it,
And
diba?
trusting yourself that you'll know how to wing it when you get there.
Yeah, and also, in the pandemic, it's a lot of really asking for help from other people. And I'm sure you guys have figured this out also. Before the pandemic, probably you had a lot of confidence in just being on your own and doing things on your own. And then after a while, during the pandemic, marirealize mo na importante pala talaga that you have a good community of people that you can trust and ask help from. Because it's not easy, right? Whether you're a parent or a single person, or you're married or not married, it's hard. We're not designed to just be on our own. We're designed to have a community around us. And that is the truth in whatever aspect of life, personal or otherwise.
Very true. Community is so important. That's why we have our own little community.
That's why we're here.
Hello. Okay, our second question comes from Mary Joy, who wants to know, how do you go through consistency of progress when it comes to adulthood?
Oh my gosh, I don't. Consistency is key. Can everybody repeat that with me?
Consistency is key.
In anything. If you want to be consistently bad at something or really bad at something, you have to be consistently bad at it. Ang sabi nga nila, di ba, the definition, for example, of sin in the Bible is not that one time that you make a mistake. It's the habit of sinning. It's the habit of consistently doing something wrong. Now, that's not to say that just one sin is okay. It's the habit, it's the consistency that really brings life into the things in our lives. So, consistency is also it's the most important part of our progress and productivity and development, but it's also the hardest, right? It's the hardest thing to give energy into, because that means that even on days when you don't have the capacity, the motivation, or the energy to do the things that you should be doing, you have to do it. You have to find the consistency to do it. And so the way that I progress in consistency is I mortify the parts of me that I know aren't helping me to be consistent, and I don't let my emotions lead me. Again, I'll say that. I don't let my emotions lead me. That doesn't mean that I don't let my emotions be expressed. It just means that my emotions will not be the compass of my actions. Because when our emotions are the compass of our actions, it leads us to so much trouble. You know, the normal saying in our modern society, yes, or thank you for the affirmation. No, but I appreciate it. Yes, you may shout out your comments as long as they're not negative, para hindi ma-record. No, but you know how modern society tells us, you just follow your heart, follow your emotions. But in reality, in the Bible, it says the heart is deceitful, di ba? Because our emotions are always what? Fleeting. Di ba? Have you ever been angry for one whole year? Probably not, di ba? There are days when you're angry and then you're not angry. There are days when you're passionate and then you're not passionate. And so our emotions and our hearts shouldn't be the compass by which we live our lives. It's definitely something that will teach us. It's definitely something that we could use as a guide of some sort, but it shouldn't be the main compass. And so I forgo my emotions on some days. I compartmentalize it and I ask myself, what is the main goal and what are the small steps that I can take to go towards that main goal? If, for example, my main goal is, let's say, now that I had just given birth to my beautiful baby boy, he's 9 months now. And when I gave birth, it was hard because I just wanted to eat everything, you know, and meron akong thought na, ano ko, deserve ko to, naglabas ako ng bata sa, di ba, sa mundo, hello, after 9 months. But then, I realized na, I need to be disciplined because whatever I eat, since I breastfeed him, he gets that also. So may mga days ako na I just want to indulge in sweets and junk food and all of these things. But I realized yung consistency of just, okay, I can't do the whole thing, but maybe I can eat a little bit of sweets and then more greens. You know, even those small steps kasi, I think we underestimate the small steps and say that the big steps are the only things that matter. But on a day-to-day basis, do you do the big things all the time? Or are we doing small things compounded over time that eventually result to our character, our habits, and our work? Diba it's the small steps talaga? Like I wasn't a host on TV kaagad. What started out as what? Me watching TV, listening to podcasts, listening to radio, reading books. Years of that compounded and then it turned out to be na ganito na ako kadaldal na isang question ka lang mga 30 minutes lang ako nagsasalita. Sorry na. Okay, next question.
Yeah, we learned a lot. Medyo natangalan ako dun sa everything.
Natangalan ako dun sa lahat.
I love that. Small steps is really the key.
Yeah.
The consistency. It's good things to take away from this. All of it. Okay, we have our fourth question from Gabriel Santiago who asks, at this point in your life, what else do you want to achieve? Or reflects to Joyce?
My old body. My old body. I want to be more grateful. It's weird. The older you get, and the more of the things that you've prayed for God gives you, the more ungrateful you become. I guess it's the depravity of the soul, right? And the thing that I'm always trying to work on now is gratitude. Because I think the reason why we become so lonely at times, the reason why we become so discontented, the reason why we constantly try to drag ourselves back into the rat race and forego the valuable relationships that we have in all of these things is because we're not grateful enough. We're not counting our blessings on a day-to-day basis. Like, my goodness, if you have legs and arms, as Lucky mentioned earlier, wow, you have legs and arms, you're already blessed. Diba? If you're already here, like you had the money to go to this place and sit here in the audience because you're not sick, because you're healthy, because you had the money to buy a Grab or whatever. Mag-commute ka man dito or mag-drive ka, that already is a blessing in itself. The fact that you can hear me speak, the fact that you are breathing right now, it's a blessing. But because we experience it on a day-to-day basis, we stop counting it as a blessing and we start overlooking all of these things. And then that translates also in the big things of our lives. Before, sasabihin ko lang kay Lord, magkaroon ako ng asawa na mabait. At saka mga 6'1", gwapo, makapal-kilay. Specific pala. Hindi dati, bago ko ma-meet si Wancho, Lord, kahit God-feeling lang. Tapos nung na-meet ko si Wancho, hindi Christian, ay, kahit gwapo na rin pala, Lord. Bakit naman hindi? Deserve ko naman ata yun. But what I'm trying to say is, in the beginning of our progresses and our journeys, you're happy with little. And then, when you're given little, you're like, hindi, parang gusto ko pa pala ng more. Parang sabi ko nga, you guys know about probably our home in Makati, diba? Our first condo together. And I told God, sabi ko, Lord, pag nabenta to, content na ako. Hindi na ako magtatrabaho. Kaya na yun ang adulting with Joyce Pring community. Ganon. Hindi, pero sabi ko, I'm gonna slow down talaga. Kasi at least meron na akong ipon kahit papano and I can really slow things down. And then when I got sold, Lord, hindi, kailangan ko pa pala ng more. Magtatrabaho pa ako. I'll get 3 more jobs. Ganon. Because our contentment doesn't come from achieving or acquiring things. It comes from perspective. It comes from a change of perspective. And it comes from an intentional sense of gratitude for our ultimate provider and giver. Because if you tell yourself that when I have this relationship, when I get that job, when I have this much amount of money in my bank, when I buy that house, or when I get that car, then I'll be happy, you're sorely mistaken. The human heart and the soul of our bodies are not going to be satisfied with a finite thing. We will never be satisfied. And so it takes a change of perspective and mortifying that part of you that says, I need more. I want more. Because you keep feeding it, it'll just keep growing. So look onto the ultimate provider and giver and change your perspective into that of gratitude and thankfulness. With however little you have, I'm not saying don't be ambitious. Of course, maximize your potential is what we're going for, right? But don't let it be the ultimate purpose of your life because it's gonna turn out empty. It's gonna be hard.
I have a follow-up question to that.
Yes. I'm serious, way.
I just want to know, is there anything that you do or that you think that we can do like on a regular basis to keep ourselves in that grateful perspective?
That's a good question. Not a girl. So a practical thing that I used to have was a gratitude journal. So you can start with just 3 simple things that you're grateful for today. And they don't have to be grand things like, oh, I bought a new bag today. It could be small things. I had coffee with my mom this morning. Or I was able to have a video conference with a gratitude journal in the Adulting with Joyce Pring journal. Yes. Thanks,
Available
girl.
outside.
Available outside if you haven't purchased yet. So that's one. Second would be mindfulness talaga. Really slowing down. Because I think when your life is very fast-paced, wherein you're doing one thing after another and you're just trying to accomplish so many things, one after the other, hindi ka nag-slow down, talagang hindi ka magiging grateful. Kasi you don't have time to pause and see like, how far have I gone? What are the things that I've achieved and how has God blessed me? So that's one. And then another, honestly, I jump out of social media. Because, listen to the podcast by all means and follow us, right? But I jump out of social media because I find that our brains are not capable of processing the amount of information and life highlights that are on social media without feeling inadequate. When you're on social media, you're just like, how am I not that pretty? How am I not that rich? How am I not in that, buti pa si nakapag-travel na, gano'n, diba? So, kailangan mong i-pull out yung sarili mo sa ganung culture. Kasi, syempre, hindi naman bad din na pinopost nila yun, diba? We all want to share the good things that are happening in our lives. But you also have to catch yourself. Because even if you're not out on social media wanting to compare your life or wanting to be jealous, di ba? Or covet other people's lives, you end up doing it. Kasi nature siya eh, di ba? We all want something good in our lives. We all want to feel good. And when we see people's highlights in their Instagram stories or in their social media account, parang ikaw, I want to feel that good. She looks like she's having a blast, you know. So those are the three things that I would usually do.
I love it. Thank you. I'm gonna do that once I get home.
Yes!
Okay, and now we have our last question from the registration, which is how do you stay purposeful despite the business of adulting life?
Ooh. How do you stay purposeful despite the business of adulting life? Busyness. Sorry.
Business
Oh. sorry.
busyness.
Okay.
Yes.
You know, it's holding on to what my real calling is as a human being, which is to glorify God. Because everything else changes. Everything else fails and falters and fades and it becomes different. But when I'm reminded of my purpose in life, which is to really glorify God and maximize my talents, my time, and my treasure, and do that for His glory and for the good of other people, that's what I focus on. So hindi ako nag-flail according to circumstances. Because if your purpose is, I need to be the number one in my company, what happens after you become number one? I need to get that person to be my partner. Oh, what happens then? Tapos malalaman mo, mag-aaway kayo. Tao din pala siya. Diba? I'll be happy and I'll be content na with my adulting life kapag nagawa ko na itong mga bagay na to. What happens once you achieve that? It will pull you into so many different directions. And it will remind you that life is not about just achieving things. Diba? It's not about just prioritizing your schedule. It's knowing your priorities, knowing your purpose, and prioritizing that instead and creating a schedule around that. And the 5 things that my husband and I would always, parang hindi niyo makalala yung husband ko, 1, 2, and 9 pala would always say. God, spouse, children, work, ministry. So, unahin namin palagi si Lord, yung relationship namin kay God. Kasi pag okay to, okay kami mag-asawa. Tapos pag okay kami mag-asawa, okay si Eliam, sure. Kapag okay tong tatlo na to, mag-excel kami sa work. And even if we don't excel, we know that we have a God who will provide for us and care for us and love us and has promises for us. He is a faithful, beautiful, loving God. And as long as this one is okay and this one, yung work, I'll be fine. Hindi ako matatakot na hindi kailangan ko i-please yung boss ko. Hindi kailangan ko mandaya para ako yung number 1 sa exam or anything like that. So that's how you stay purposeful. You remember what are your priorities and what are the things that actually matter. Because when you're adulting and when you're busy in life, it's so easy to forget the things that actually matter. And just think, hindi, I need to achieve these small things around me. Kasi nakikita mo yung mga friends mo ginagawa yun, di ba? Pero knowing your priorities and your purpose will keep you on track despite the circumstances and no matter what other people say. So, yeah.
Everyone, let's give her a round of applause right now. Grabe yun, ha? Thank you also for everyone who sent in their questions for this segment. I'm sure everyone who sent in their questions are like, they're amazed right now. They're so grateful. And I wanted to ask, do you know if our special guest is already ready?
I am not sure. Do I know if our
I think
special
they
guest
are.
is already
Perfect timing. Okay, now, I'm sure you already know, but we have another special guest with us to share her own wisdom. There she is, an online educational content creator, author, podcast host, and resource speaker. Everyone, please welcome Coach Laika Maravilla.
ang taray na jumpsuit and sneakers.
Tatanggal ba ako ang mask? Baka yung kakambal ko ako.
Okay lang kung hindi ka comfortable.
Okay lang naman.
Ang ganda naman ng outfit mo.
Alam mo ba, ganyan yung outfit ko kanina. Buti nag-binis ako. Baka pasayaw tayong manugas dito. Kakabuhin. So, hello po sa inyo lahat.
Nastan sila, coach.
Ayun.
So, she's our special guest.
Ayun.
Surprising.
Special kasi may tuldok dito.
Ba yun?
We have questions. I'll just ask it from here.
Okay. We have questions. You want me to ask it? Do you have that?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
You don't have to hold anything and you can look pretty there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, from our online form as well. Can you name a person who has had a tremendous impact on you as a leader?
Joyce Pring.
I was just gonna say, like, Marabina. Ano ba yan?
Pasensya na
no?
mag-kumari kami, kaya nagugulahan.
Gumagana naman. Masaya naman kami pareha sa bulahan.
Okay. Ako ba muna?
Oo, kakopyahin ko yung sagot mo yan. Kaya ka nga nandito, kailangan ko ng matalinong tao para i-copy-paste ko na lang.
Well, siguro as a leader, I'd have to say my one of my mentors, si Attorney Janet Villa. Nag-guest na rin siya sa podcast ko, if any of you listen to it. Pero, I think yung leadership niya kasi is different than yung usual definition natin of leadership. You know how people would say, ang leadership is dominance, right? Parang assert your power. Diba? Parang first meeting pa lang, pagpasok mo, dapat, ikaw yung loudest person in the room. Dapat establish mo na ikaw pinakamaraming alam. And ang funny dun is, she is actually literally the smartest person I know. Kasi hindi lang siya basta member ng Mensa, kung familiar ka sa Mensa. Dati siyang president ng Mensa.
Wild.
Yes, so sobrang talino talaga noon, as in, bawa ko sa kanya. Pero she never enters a room declaring na dominante siya. Hindi. I rarely see her talking about herself. Pero may equality siya na halika alamin natin together. So obviously, she knows things, pero hindi niya i-assert na ako alam ko, hindi niyo alam. Hindi. Lagi siyang, halika, check natin, Google natin together. So yung ganong klaseng leadership, I think, yun yung nag-impact sa akin. Kaya na-redefine yung leadership sa utak ko. Kasi growing up in a very fundamentalist religious household, my dad was a pastor. Ang leadership natin kadalasan, di ba, parang hear and obey. So very ganon. Pero doon ko na-appreciate kay Attorney Janet yung a person knows kung paano mag-follow if they understand the vision, if they understand the reason why. So doon na nag-iba yung idea ko na, okay, hindi ko kailangan gawin yung mga bagay na yun. Mas maganda if you lead by example, if you lead by, encouraging people to journey with you versus parang taking down anyone who stands in your way. Yeah. Okay na?
I concur. I concur. Yun lang pala. That's a good question. Yung unang kong sagot dapat, si Jesus po. Bakit?
Sige, tayo lang natin dito eh. Gano'n ang Christian ba kailangan natin dito?
Hindi. Okay, sige, fine. I would say, and this is gonna sound so cheesy, but Juancho.
Ay!
Huwag niyo i-record, baka malaman. Ito talaga naiisip ko, sinusungitan ko pa naman siya para matakot siya sa akin. Hindi, pero kasi when you were describing that, Juancho is literally like that in our marriage. He is the most humble and willing to learn person that I know. And granted, there are times when he really does not know anything. As most men are sometimes clueless, with a lot of things happening around them. But Juancho is one of those people who is just always willing to go before me instead of just saying, this is how you should do things. He's the type of person that is willing to listen and is willing to humble himself even when he's on the right. Kahit siya yung tama, kahit alam niyang I'm out of place and I'm wrong, he actually slows down and goes to my level for me to be able to understand and listen to me lovingly. And I think that's what we need in a leader, not someone who, as you mentioned, is just out there to dominate. Kasi, of course, in our marriage, we believe in that structure of a wife is to submit and a husband is to lead. But he takes that and remembers the verses before that, which is a husband is supposed to love his wife as Christ loved the church. And he shows that in our marriage. And a leader should be able to do that because it's hard to submit to someone who is only there to dominate you. And I don't feel like that in our marriage. I feel like he's loving me first and getting on my level and listening to me and carrying my heart gently. So it's easy for me to submit and follow. So,
Sana all. And the congregation says, sana all.
joke lang yun. Opposite.
Okay, next question from Angela Corpus is, what's the best thing to prioritize in your 20s?
Guys, ganito kami mag-podcast ni Joyce.
may moment for brooding and ruminating.
Medyo kinakabahan nga ako kasi usually may parts na Kiara, putulin mo tong part na. Sa amin lang to. Sa atin lang to. No?
Safe space.
Yeah. Pero in your 20s, I think, yun yung time talaga for learning real world experiences. No? Kasi di ba theoretically, no? Kasi iba na may K-12 na ngayon. Dati kasi 20, talagang isi-send ka out into the world, graduate ka ng 20. May mga inabutan ba ng K-12 dito? Sige, labas mo.
Yung interns. Si Pamela tsaka si Joanne.
Okay. But di ba, your 20s are meant for learning things. Or putting the things you've learned into context. Sabihin na natin. Kasi it's one thing to know things sa utak, pero yung in practice, ibang disiplina yun eh. Learning how to deal with different types of people, learning how to lead and follow. Kasi kahit naman sa ang larangan, kahit sa ang role mo, kahit wala kang strong power or positional authority, nag-lead pa rin tayo eh. So I think that your 20s is the best time for that. It's the best time to make mistakes, consequences ng mistakes mo. Pag bata ka kasi, minsan meron ka pang safety net eh. Parang, okay, naku, kahit na hindi ko nagawa yung project ko, pakisalo na lang, bes. Parang gano'n. Pero pag nasa work ka na, medyo wala nang gano'n. Right? Natututunan din natin na kung lagi din natin sasalo yung mga kasama natin, di ba? Hindi din sila matututo. So, yun talaga yung finding eh, yung learning, yung taking on. Sa akin, tingin ko, 20s is a great time for that. Pero maganda din siyang transition into your 30s, kung nasan na ako. Yes.
Umami na kayo. Grass, LJ,
Everybody say amen.
Yung mga original na team pring dyan, ayun kayo mga...
Labasan ng birth certificate. Pero that's the time naman, okay, ito yung natutunan ko, ito na yung tamang konteksto niya, paano ko siya ngayon ipapasa. Kasi yung 30s mo, doon ka nagiging bridge ka between yung mga bagong salta sa mundo at yung mga matatanda na siguro kahit paano nag-mentor sa'yo. Ikaw yung nagsistand sa gap. So, 20s, I think, is the time for learning.
Ganda nun. Wala na ako masagot. Kailangan mo na yan. Ikaw na. Gusto mo yung gano'n? Smart shaming. Sila yung kailangan mag-walk at pag nag-smart shame tayo, siya lang tatamaan.
Grabe.
Hindi. Pero I honestly super agree kasi that's also what I went through. You know, I traveled, I learned so much, I made so many mistakes. But also, to add to that, your 20s is the time for you to invest in relationships that are not romantic. And I say that because when you get, take it from me, when you get into a relationship when you're in your 20s, and I'm not saying break up with your girlfriend or your boyfriend right now, when you have a relationship, the person that you're with in that relationship will really steer the ship on how you will become as a person, who you will become as a person. And one of the things that I really missed out on in my early 20s, now I'm turning 29 this year, is just being with my friends. You know, like, feeling ko I played catch up in the past 5 years because I wasted so much of my time. Okay, not that I wasted, I spent so much of my time going from one relationship to another, getting heartbreaks, you know, dating people, that I wasn't able to invest in my friends, personal friends, colleagues, people that I'm working with. Like, I don't have friends in the industry, for example. Very little, like Laika, siguro. And other people. So, I can't even, like, I'm trying to think in my head, sino nga ba Aaron?
Yun lang, nakikita yun sa podcast yun.
Yun na yun. Yun. Kung sino yung mga lagi nyo naririnig sa podcast, those are all of my industry friends. Because, like, my best friend, Faith, my longest friend, we've been friends since I was like 9 years old. I feel like I'm just blessed because she was always there. Like, she never left the friendship. But I was so absent from our friendship. So many times I'm such a crappy friend.
Okay, heart issues. Faith, ka na. Your turn.
Faith, bigyan na ba kita ng mic? Hindi, pero totoo, kailangan mo talaga mag-invest in friendships while you're in your 20s. It's something that people don't talk about because it's always about, achieve your career and all that. But when you're in your late 20s and in your 30s na, what you'll realize is it's hard to find good people in your life.
Yep.
And if you don't invest in those relationships, meaning you don't care enough to call them or spend time with them or check up on them, kahit na yung mga usual na every 3 months lang makita kayo or mag-usap kayo ng malalim at hindi small talk, ang hirap ng buhay pag wala kang mga ganong kaibigan. Kasi yun ang importante eh. Relationships are what keeps us grounded. Diba? And it helps us and challenges us to grow and be better. So,
Totoo yun. Tsaka 20s, kailangan talaga ng maraming emotional support. Diba? Kasi hindi naman biro talaga yung quarter life crisis. Kasi 20s mo, doon ka napapaisip ko yung nasayang ko yung buhay ko. May mga, I understand guys, kasi gaya ako dyan. Yung parang feeling mo, ito na ba, corporate world na lang, corporate slave na lang ako. Parang, ito na ba yung buhay ko? May meaning ba yung life ko? I understand that. But having friends na around the same age, na pareho kayong lost, di ba?
damay na
Di ba? Sama-sama pa kayo ngayon, di ba? Ayan. At least, di ba, yun yung sinasabi ko rin kay Joyce lagi. There's value, there's comfort in shared suffering. Kakasama kayo ng pagdadaanan. Pero yan, it really is very important. Kaya mamaya i-text nyo na, i-DM nyo na yung mga friends ninyo. May trend kasi sa TikTok ngayon, Tita Joyce. Kasi mas madalas ako sa TikTok. I have that on. Hindi yung nakakalungkot eh. Ano yung sad music. Tapos parang, kasi yung mga friends daw nila, parang na-realize na basta basically challenge siya na stop texting yung friends mo. Tapos see what happens. Kasi apparent, tapos nakakaawa yung mga nakikita ko. And naawa ko kasi nakaka-empathize ako. May mga friends ka minsan na pag hindi ka talaga nag-effort, walang mangyayari sa friendship kasi hindi ka nila hinahanap. Hindi ka nila text, hindi ka nila yayain, right? Sometimes, naiintindihan ko yung pain na gano'n, na parang ikaw yung lagi nag-effort sa friendship. Pero sa akin, wag din natin masyadong isara yung pinto. Di ba? Baka busy lang talaga sa season ng life nila. So yun, effortan natin yung mga kaibigan natin.
kahit maliit na effort lang.
Sorry ito yung nilalam mo.
Hi, Sandy.
Next question.
Okay lang.
Kiara,
ano ba yun si Sandy binigyan si
Hindi kasi.
Ano ba yun?
Kiara, step up. Ano ang pala? Hindi, pero promise, kahit online na joke. Kasi ito pa-quiz tayo ng konti. Hulaan nyo, ilang beses na kami nakita ni Joyce sa buhay namin. Ilang beses na.
Okay, put up your hand on ano yung guess nyo. 1, 2, 3, go.
Walang tumama. Ay, hindi, meron. 4. Tama ba? 3 lang. Away lang. Ilan na ba? 3. 3. Ay, 3 nga. 3 nga. 3 tama. Third to, di ba?
Third to.
Third lang. Tama.
Bakit fourth?
Wala ka 4.
Okay lang.
Hindi. Kasi ano yun eh.
In person?
Virtual. Pero in person. Third. Kasi YouTube Ads Awards.
Google.
Tapos when I went over. Ay, hindi, 4.
Ay, 4
4, girl! Tama ako! Tama ako eh. Math yun eh. Confident ako.
Oo nga, hindi ko yung strong suit.
You're right.
4 pala.
Yeah, 4 times pala. Pero again, when you invest in friendships, kahit yung kumustahan lang every now and then, nakita mo yung stories niya, hindi masyadong masaya. Yung mga ganun, kumustahin niyo naman. And in fairness kay Joyce, kahit busy siya, kinamusta niya ako every now and then. Yung every now and then, twice yun.
I'm working on it. Tapos yung energy mo ba? Let's talk about depression.
Right there, right now.
Let's deep dive into the depression. Pero no, okay. So, not a laughing matter, but I think we also have to hold space for people and understand that I'm not making an excuse for myself. I'm making an excuse on behalf of anybody else who is going through a tough time. That sometimes, even when people want to be present in your life, just dealing with their own emotions and the things that they're going through is hard enough. And even the small efforts of, kita naman tayo, usap tayo saglit, or, you know, like, pumunta ka naman sa event ko para may excuse ako magkwentuhan tayo.
Actually.
Those things matter because at the end of the day, it's not the amount of time that you spend with one person. It's the depth of the relationship and how much you're willing to be vulnerable and really invest in that relationship, diba?
Totoo, nag-cancel ako ng dalawang events para dito. Talaga, hindi.
Huwag mo akong singilin, Zanny, wala akong pambayad.
Hindi, alam ni Z kasi kailangan ko rin si Joyce. Kailangan ko rin conversations with Joyce.
Magde-date lang talaga kami dito sa cafe. Kasi pa-event na nga tayo na sayang naman.
I-record na rin natin, sayang content. Ganun. Pero yun, kasi totoo yun. Kasi I think for the both of us, we both go through periods of depression. So, we understand each other na, okay, yun nga, parang minsan nararamdaman mo na rin yung parang, okay, hindi maganda masyado yung siguro yung season na to ng life niya. It's either you give them space or at least you offer to be there. If they can be there, you understand. Ang wish ko, honestly, for all of you, medyo nag-derail yung conversation, pero ang wish ko for you is to find people like that, who will journey with you, na hindi, kasi ang demand sa time, di ba, hindi naman type lang kasi ako lagi ko tinatanong kung gagawin natin sa time na yun, di ba? Pero ang importante talaga yung understanding more than anything. Kasi you can spend years with someone, pero they can effort to understand you. Pero you can be with someone occasionally, pero have that kind of relationship. So that's what I want for all of you. Claim nyo na lang. Less na lang. Yung payong, balik tayo.
Ang tita ng payong balik na rin. Ano ba yun?
Masensya na, panahon ng procedure. Sabihin nyo, balik tayo yung payong.
Tayo rin nagka-intindihan kung himig sila. Next question.
Next question is from Lovely. She asks, I'm about to start my own podcast this year. What advice would you give me to help motivate or inspire this new journey?
Oh my gosh.
Laika.
Dahil lagi ako pinapauwi.
Siyempre.
Ano ba? Do it for a purpose, I always tell people. For podcasting specifically, or content creation in general, whether Instagram post yan, blurb, any type of content you put out, mas maganda if you think na you're doing it for a purpose. Kung ang purpose na yon is to share your thoughts to the world, to change the world, maganda. Kung ganun ka lofty yung ideas. Pero kung hindi naman ganun, pwede rin na you do it as a kind of journal. Online journal lang for yourself. Kasi I'm so grateful na I've been in the content creation game for siguro almost 10 years na. Sometimes na, hindi naman sa pagbubuhat ng mga no? Pero yung minsan may babalik sa Facebook memories o kaya sa Instagram memories na post mo noon. Tapos parang, girl, ang idealistic mo ha. Parang 8 years ago, nasa na yung taong yan. Parang ganun. Or minsan ako-convict ako sa sarili kong words. No? Weird, no? Pero yung kasi yung sinulat mo yun ng bata ka. Diba? Maganda rin na may ganun tayo. Kasi parang lang siyang journaling. Kaya lang, kasi yung journaling, syempre, ikaw lang nakakabasa. Diba? Siya kasi role. Diba? Pero hindi nababasa ng lahat. Parang, when you put content out there, ang bonus niya lang is baka may mga tao who can empathize with you or you're going through the same thing. parang nasa scale ba yung experience. So, just start. Tapos gawin mo siya for yourself, not necessarily for views, for success. So, hindi talaga, ano lang yun, healthy side effect lang of putting out content. Pero kung titignan mo siya as that, na parang, okay, gusto ko lang na may babalikan ako. Kasi sa tingin ko podcasting, kayo lahat, if you can afford to do it sa time, kahit make me lang 2 minutes, 3 minutes, maganda if you do something like that because, emotional. Okay. Kasi what we forget, ito di ba, sa senses ng tao, ang una natin nakakalimutan is boses. So, when we lose people we love, di ba sometimes we keep photos of them, so we know what they look like. Pero pag wala tayong recording ng boses nila, nawawala yun. Nakakalimutan natin yung boses nila. Yun yung unang nawawala. Yung amoy, yun yung huli. Kaya minsan, lalakad ka sa parang ex ko yun. Parang gano'n ako pareho. Atlantis eh.
Expound.
O yung mga 90s babies, nakarelate, di ba? Lahat ng mga, lahat ng varsity nun, Atlantis. Bigyan naman yun. Pero yung gano'n yun, yung smell naalala natin, pero voice yun. So when you record things, di ba, if you ever have kids in the future, mga pamangkin ninyo, na-immortalize yung part na yun ng journey mo. Tapos pwede nilang balik-balikan. Kasi I'm so grateful kasi I lost some of the people I love the most last year. Tapos when I feel na parang, kasi ako Lola's girl ako, I lost my Lola last year. May videos ako niya, buti na lang, kasi sumasama siya sa akin sa live stream minsan, kasi pipray siya, ganun, bibili na niya yung Team Laika. Binabalikan ko yung mga videos na yun. Tapos parang naririnig ko yung boses ng lola ko. Diba? If I ever have kids, at least pwede ko i-play na yun yung boses ng lola. So you can do it for that purpose. I can do it. I can't do that.
Thank you for sharing that. Wala na akong masabi. Ang ganda na sinabi ni Laika. Ang hirap naman kasi nun ang simple at practical ang una mong sinabi, tapos biglang wala mo. Ganda. But yeah, that's so true. And I think when I started the podcast 4 years ago, I never thought it would blow up to be like this. Because I was just literally a 25-year-old going through a quarter-life crisis, and I had no idea how to deal with all of the emotions that I was going through. And having a podcast gave me that. It gave me a chance to express myself. And yun nga, and nakakatawa, kasi some of you guys would message me and you'd be like, grabe no, dati nirecord mo na, kakabreak mo lang, or nagpe-pray kayo about separating ni one chicken, tapos ngayon may asawa na, mag-asawa na kayo. So it's good, it's a journaling kind of thing. But at the same time, I think one of the things that hold people back before starting a podcast is, may ganyan na kasing podcast eh. Diba? Like, may podcast na about that. Ginawa na yan ni ganito eh. Or may adulting, ang isipin mo, there's no such thing as an original thought anymore. Every thought that you have has been thought of before. But it's never been thought of by you. And so your voice offers a unique perspective to the world. So never dampen it because you see other people doing it better. Perhaps. Perhaps people are doing it better. Perhaps they're not. Perhaps from your perspective it looks better, but perhaps from other people's perspectives, it's not. Like I remember I put out a 32-minute episode that's entitled The One Where I Blabber for 32 Minutes. And it was just me going through a really deep season of depression. And so many people messaged me about that. Like, that was such a good episode. And like, bakit? Favorite mo yun? Walang kwenta yun, girl. Pili ka ng bagong episode. Parang hindi ka na nakinig after nun, LG. Tagal na nun, 2018 pa tayo. No, but what I'm trying to say is, we are so held back by thinking that other people do it better. Which you probably do sometimes,
Totoo naman.
That's true naman. But
Pero on whose ruler kasi?
Sorry?
On whose ruler kasi?
Yeah.
Diba? Kaninong standards yung mo na-measure yung sarili mo. Tsaka yung lagi tayo mas critical sa sarili natin. Tsaka you always have a unique voice. Pwedeng sabihin nyo yung exact same thing, pero magkaiba lang ng konti ng intonation, magkaiba ng konti ng context, magkaiba ng joke na sinabi din sa susunod na part, pero totally iba na yung perspective. Tsaka there's so many, one thing na na-learn ko rin, sorry sumisingit ako, pero one thing na-learn ko sa podcasting, especially with trying hard, kasi yung Get Hired 2017 pa yun. Tsaka very, may why and purpose nun to help people get a job. Pero yung trying hard, experiment ko lang talaga siya. Ang natutuhan ko is, hindi pala ako mag-isa. Like, ang daming people with similar thoughts, similar struggles. Yung sometimes, di ba, you think na parang, yung podcast ko kasi parang, generic na siya. Okay, ang dami ng tao nag-cover ng same topic. Parang kami ni Joyce, may stress management kami pareho. Meron kami time management pareho.
Pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. Pero, iba yung atake niya sa ibang tao. Kasi iba ka rin. So, you will find your tribe din. As you go along.
And I think you also have to look at how people are built differently.
Yep.
Like, every person that you meet comes from an exactly different perspective of the world. Kasi iba yung history niya, iba yung body niya, iba yung way niya of absorbing things eh. And that in itself is a way for you to see things differently. So you will have something different to offer. And the more that you exercise using your voice and expressing it, mas nagkakaroon ka ng sense. Totoo!
Totoo rin yun. Yung mga kasi syempre yung mga unang episodes, kahit naman sa videos di ba? Sa YouTube, my very first videos, kasi basura talaga. Para feeling ko. Pero again, even yung older videos, some people found value in that.
Yeah.
So, minsan lang, ganun lang talaga. Huwag tayo masyado rin, huwag tayo masyado kritikal sa sarili natin. At saka ang speaking, ang writing, kasi ang podcast, ang speaking is writing with your lips, basically, di ba? Yung pag-form mo ng train of thoughts mo, yung pag-expound mo sa isang certain material, yung things na to, hindi talaga pinapanganak yung bata, tapos magaling na siya. Lahat naman tayo ng bata nagbababol, di ba? Mga bata pag nagkwento, pakatapos. Ganun sila lahat, di ba? Pero gumagaling tayo sa storytelling, the more stories we share, di ba?
Yeah.
So, the more you podcast, the more episodes you put out, nag-i-improve din siya. Kung medyo cringy lang talaga sa dulo, di baba mo na yung mga lumang episodes. Mahiya ka na ng content. Or actually, pwede nyo hindi i-public, di ba? First 50 episodes kasi experimental pa lang siya. So sa friends mo muna, di ba? Or sa'yo lang muna. Tapos pag medyo confident ka na, tsaka mo na siya i-public. Pwede naman yun. You can play around with those.
Love it. Sorry, Raisa, ang haba ng mga sagot natin.
Ay, sorry. Sabi ko sa'yo kahit pag kami mga 6 hours. Hanggang kailan ba tayo?
So your last question from the online form is, how do you balance everything in life?
Is there even such a thing? How do you balance everything in life? I think, would you agree that there is this notion in the modern world that balance is like up there in the things that you want to achieve in your life, but in reality, it's really not something that people achieve to the extent that we want. I don't believe that there is such a thing as a super balanced life. There will be things that you have to give up. And yun talaga yun, doon ako naniniwala. Balance in my head is knowing my priorities and knowing what I say no to at certain periods of time in my life. And that in itself for me is balance. It's knowing that, okay, for this time of my life, or this time of the day, I'm gonna say yes to this and I'm gonna say no to this thing. And that for me is balance. Understanding that that's where I find my center. It's not really about balancing all things at the same time. It's finding your priorities and knowing what gives you center. Kasi when you have that, pwede kang ma-off balance every so often, pero okay ka lang kasi alam mo kung ano yung North Star mo at kung ano yung center mo. So, yeah.
Good answers.
Ang hirap pag-una ako.
Hindi, tama yun. Like, I always tell my students that. Saying yes to one thing means saying no to everything else. So, very important yun. Kalokohan, eto medyo radical, pero kalokohan yung you can have it all. Hindi ako niniwala dun. Kasi 24 hours ka lang in a day eh. Ako, hanga ako kay Joyce kasi may baby pa siya. Ako nga aso lang, hindi ko pa maiwan. Nandiyan siya sa labas. No? Napakahirap. Talaga yung balance nga. Medyo, I think someone who says, I live a perfectly balanced life, is either lying or is oblivious. No, ibig sabihin, hindi siya nakikinig dun sa feedback nung baka yung anak niya, wala na siyang oras sa anak niya, hindi niya naririnig, ganon. Kasi hindi talaga eh. I think it's easier to say na well-balanced ang buhay ng isang tao if you're outside looking in. Na parang, oy, ang ganda ng buhay ni Joyce. Di ba? Pag sa Instagram, na-scroll ka, wow, well-balanced. Diba? Uy, si Coach, may time pa makipaglaro sa aso niya, no? Pero hindi naman ganun everyday. Dadagdag ko doon sa sinabi ni Joyce, di ba? Very important yun eh, mag-cut ka ng loss. Yung mga bagay na hindi mo kayang gawin ngayon, wala, hindi na ito yung season ng life mo for that, right? Oh, wala akong oras makipag-date, di ba? Ganun talaga eh, anong gagawin mo, di ba? Pero
Wala ka pa rin oras.
Hindi, pero wag ka. I know my priorities na kasi, Joyce. Hindi, pero wag ka, ang key here is, wag ka mag-hold ng resentment for things na hindi mo na-pursue. Yun ang nagiging problema kasi minsan, nagiging burden siya sa life of balance. When you look at things na hindi mo pinili, tapos inisip mo, sana pinili ko yun. Sana abogado na ako, sana ganito na ako. Kung meron kang ganun, doon na bumibigat eh, doon humihirap. Pero kung wala ka nun, walang resentment, tapos dali bumalanse. Another thing, concept tayo ng balance. No? Mas mahirap bumalanse pag di ka bumagala. Tama? Alam mo yung bata tayo pag cleaners, yung nagpabalance ka ng walis. Right? Kung nagbabalance ka ng walis, di ba? Tapos nakaganyan ka lang, so malalaglag yun. Tama? The way for you to keep that walis balanced, yes, is to keep moving, di ba? Kung magtitilt siya dito, bawi ka, di ba? Tilt ka dito. Ganon din sa, I think, sa life. It's easier when you keep moving, no? Parang, lumalaylay dito, yung grades ko, pabagsak na sa subject na to, bawi tayo, di ba? Yung grades ko doon, medyo marami pa, dito muna ako focus, right? Parang, okay pa ako dyan, di ba? Or yun, sa bahay, di ba? O sa negosyo, tumatakbo ng maigi yung negosyo. May time ba ako? Kasi ako sa totoo lang, no? As an entrepreneur, yes, CEO. Yeah. Tempting yung idea na expansion, di ba? Expand tayo, no? Mag-release tayo ng ganyan. Pero kung wala akong oras para doon, di ba? Ay, babawi ko muna, hindi ko muna yung gagawin. So you have to keep moving to achieve yung balance. Kasi I think kailangan tayo, malayo yung tingin natin to see yung balance. Kasi kung titignan mo siya day by day, walang balance sa araw na yun. Pero hopefully, at the end of our day, looking back, makita natin na okay naman pala in general. No? Kahit alam natin na may mga lulls tsaka may mga highs yung journey natin. So just keep going. Kahit sa bike, madaling bumalanse kapag gumagalaw. So kung lumaylay, bawi, move to the other side. Ano yung pwede kong bigyan? Ano yung kailangan kong i-focus? Doon tayo titingin para siyang sayaw. Just keep moving.
Noted. I love that. Mabawi si Chris sa love life.
Kaya I keep moving, di nahuhuli.
Yun lang. Panis. Pero totoo, when you were saying that, I realized also it's so important to listen for feedback if you want to find balance in your life. Because while you're moving, going back into your imagery, it's hard to see where you're not balancing and what you're not paying attention to. Classic example, when I gave birth, and I'm sorry to give a personal example, but I think it's so true. When I gave birth, I didn't realize I wasn't spending enough time with Juancho. As in, he had to sit me down and he said, hindi ka na nag-good morning sa akin. Kasi first thing na gagawin ko is take care of Liam. And you have to be open to those kinds of criticisms. And that's why I don't believe na lahat ng taong against you is a basher. Of course, unless bully talaga sila. Because sometimes people have a perspective that you don't, which is, what am I lacking? What am I missing? What are the things that I am not realizing, I'm not paying attention towards? So it's so important also to be open to feedback and listen to how people are relating to you, which I think we overlook most of the time because we're so busy trying to balance it all. Diba? Ayun lang naman.
Yeah, of course.
Grabe, ito pala yung feeling to be in the recording.
Kiara.
Nasa live recording. Anyway, so if you guys have any questions for Joyce and for Coach Laika, we have time for 2. So can we have our first question from... Okay, I'll go to you.
Bawal yung number na.
Oh, okay.
Ah!
I love that.
Abangan namin.
Yay!
Does anyone have questions? Huh?
May volunteer grass.
Okay, I think they're either they're shy or naman nila in the form. That was them. That was okay.
Yeah.
One.
Hi.
Hi, Miss Joyce and Miss Laika. Yung question ko is, how do you try to be, or how do you try to not be critical to yourself?
Yes, Laika.
I'm sorry Sorry, hindi ko minimize yung question mo. Natawa lang ako kasi ano yan eh. Constant struggle yan. Nagpapawis nga yung kamay ko, sininervous ako sa inyong lahat. Yeah.
Ano ba yun?
First, I guess, second live event ko ito. Kasi may mga brands na nag-offer ganyan, tapos parang hindi pa ako ready, guys. Hindi ako ready. I'm more comfortable working by myself. Zandy knows this. Pag nag-film ako lang mag-isa. Pinapababa ko siya. So, kahit gusto ko ako lang. Parang ganun. Ganun ako ka-critical with myself. Pero ang sa akin kasi, yun nga may pag-grounded ka kasi sa purpose mo. For example, paper, di ba? Paper lang sa school, right? Natutuhan ko kasi na yun nga, completion is better than perfection. Kasi literal na naranasan ko siya. When I was, ito very intimate, tayo lang naman, di ba? Tsaka kunyari walang video. When I entered UP, Diliman, kasi para sa mga hindi alam, drop out ako, no? UPD. Ang idea ko in my head was, uno or nothing. Ganun ako ka-critical sa sarili ko. Uno or nothing. Hindi ko rin alam kung bakit, sino nagtanim ng uno. Sa utak ko na yan. Sa utak ko niyan. Pero yung pressures kasi, yung pressures pag bata ka, di ba? Tapos kisay ka, so cream of the crop, dapat ganito. First kami na nakapag-UP sa neighborhood namin, sa church namin. So yung talagang, ang tindi ng pressure sa akin, uno or nothing. So, may time na may yung algebra class namin, perfect ko lahat ng quizzes, na unit test, leading up to the last unit test na ang nagkamali ako 2 sa unit test. Hindi ako bumalik. Pinag-expectatawanan na yung mga sinasabi ko, ganyan. Pero ang idea ko nun was, pag hindi ko natapos yung video, kung saan nagtuturo ako ng maths, mag-exam sila next week, hindi nila matututunan. So wala akong choice but to upload the video kahit na hindi siya perfect, kahit na nabulol ako, ganyan. Tapos people were responding positively naman dun sa bagay na yun. Natutuhan ko rin kahit paano na maintindihan sa sarili ko na hindi yung standards ko pala sobrang taas, hindi naman pala yung standards ng lahat. Diba? Na willing, may mga tao naman pala na willing na mahalin ako kahit hindi ako perfecto. Oo, sa totoo lang. Kasi I think accepting love from other people is also a skill. Kaya yung naggumawa nito. Hindi naman, kasi hindi naman ako ganun ka-critical sa ibang tao, di ba? O bakit critical ako sa sarili ko? Di ba? Ihabol ko lang yung standard sa sarili ko, ibaba ko na ako sa standard ko sa iba. Ganun lang. So, yun. Nakarating.
Ang ganda.
Ilo pala!
Okay.
Thank you.
Kauwi na. Hindi, pero totoo talaga. You know, when you were saying that, I remember so I would go to therapy, right? And one of the things that I realized when I went into therapy is I pretty much grew up in a family where you only matter because of the things that you can bring to the table. So that's why I became a perfectionist, because I only deserve love if I earn it. If I'm the smartest person in the room, if I'm the most hygienic, walang kakwenta-kwentang standard, pero ang taas-taas. Kailangan I need to be the coolest girl, I need to balance everything. Dapat ako yung smart, pero cool, pero pretty, pero one of the boys. Ganon. And that was a toxic trait because growing up, I only mattered to the people around me if I had that. And, you know, it took a while, but honestly, I don't want to sound really religious. The only thing that changed that was understanding that I had an audience of one. And I remember the story that my dad used to tell me of this piano maestro, and meron siyang mentor, itong piano maestro na to. So meron silang piece that they practice, and pinag-usapan na nila, okay, sa show mo, ito yung ipi-play mo, diba? But on the day of the show, the piano maestro decided that I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna do something that's a bit more extravagant, something that's louder, something that the audience will love. So he performs it, he gets a standing ovation, but when he gets to the backstage, he starts throwing things around and having a breakdown because he saw that his piano maestro walked out and wasn't happy with the performance. And told me that story to show me that in life, even if everybody else thinks you're doing great and you look amazing, you're number one, uno ka or nothing, ikaw yung smartest, prettiest, coolest person in the room, everything. But if that one person, who for me is Jesus, isn't joyful or finding what you're doing glorifying to Him, it's pointless. And I used to be the mentor. Ako dapat yung highest standard. Self-critical di ba? And then I changed that. I changed that to, ano bang point na ang salvation is given to us and not earned? It's so that we can live lives that are joyful, filled with peace, and glorifying to God, and not critical. Of course, that doesn't mean, di ba sabi nga ni Paul, it's not that you should go out and sin and do whatever you want, but it just means that you're given now space to work out your salvation and not work for it. So for me, knowing that audience of one helped me not want to always just deal with the perfectionism that comes with my upbringing and the traumas that I have, but understanding that if I do my best, and I know that God sees I'm doing my best, really, I suck at all of these things. Like, I suck at being a friend, a wife, a mom, a host, a content creator. There are days when I really just have no idea why I'm still in this game because I suck at it. Kiara handles almost everything because I don't know what to do with all of it. But as long as I'm doing my best and giving it my all, natuto ako na hindi pala kailangan perfect. Sometimes you just have to show up.
Yeah.
Yun lang naman.
Thank you so much. Let's give them both a round of applause for that amazing discussion. Okay, before we let Coach Laika go, would you like to tell us about any projects that you have going on and you wanted to check out?
Project 3. Ano ba? I guess if you want a longer conversation with me, you can go and check out Trying Hard with Laika Mardelia. I've had a number of episodes with Joyce already, so yeah, you really want to check that out. But caution, may word of caution lang, it gets deep. So kung gusto niyo masaktan, pwede kayo dun. Pero kung gusto niyo happy lang, TikTok na lang.
Picture.
Thank you.
so much, Coach Laika.